Welcome to this explainer. Take a second and just look out your window. Everything you see out there, the laws you follow, the culture you live in, the borders on the map, literally all of it stems from a few incredibly fragile moments in history. Today, we're taking a massive leap into an alternate reality to tweak just one of those moments. We're going to completely immerse ourselves in a world that has been entirely reshaped by one giant divergence, the failure of the American Revolution. Our source material today paints this incredibly vivid, almost unrecognizable picture of a globe where the United States, well, it just doesn't exist. Let's get right into it.
So, what if George Washington actually lost the Revolutionary War? It's a pretty heavy question, right? I want you to picture the Continental Army completely collapsing during that freezing, desperate winter at Valley Forge. Or actually, imagine them losing the decisive battle at Yorktown. In our timeline, those are the triumphant moments that birthed a superpower. But here, a swift defeat permanently shifts the entire map of global geopolitics. Literally everything we think we know about modern history changes in a heartbeat.
All right, Section 1. The rebellion fails. The cultural shockwave of a decisive British victory would be, well, immediate and severe. In our world, the Declaration of Independence is deeply revered, right? It's the founding blueprint of a global superpower. But in this alternate reality, remember, history is written by the victors. The Crown views that exact same document as nothing more than a failed, radical manifesto. And the men who signed it, those revered founding fathers, are remembered only as executed traitors. It's kind of chilling when you think about it. A stark reminder of how fragile historical legacies truly are, and how that line between patriot and traitor is basically drawn by whoever wins the war.
So what actually happens to those 13 colonies? Well, the source explains that they are immediately stripped of their rebellious assemblies. The whole grand experiment in democracy, shut down, done. They're placed under strict military governorships. So instead of birthing a fiercely independent new nation, North America is permanently locked in as British North America. Over the decades, it develops into this sprawling, highly urbanized, industrial crown jewel of an empire that never fractures. The British Empire holds on to its absolute most valuable asset.
Moving on to Section 2, Redrawing the Map.
Now, this timeline completely deletes a concept that we consider an absolute historical given, manifest destiny. In our world, the U.S. rapidly and brutally expanded westward, claiming the continent from coast to coast. But under continued British rule, the Royal Proclamation of 1763 remains strictly enforced. That proclamation famously forbade colonial settlement west of the Appalachian Mountains to protect indigenous territories. And in this alternate reality, that border isn't just some polite suggestion, it is fiercely guarded by British redcoats. Manifest destiny simply does not happen. No way around it.
This profoundly alters the entire demographic layout of the continent forever. The East Coast stays under strict British colonial governance, packed with all those expanding loyalist cities. But the Great Plains in the West, protected by the Crown from colonial expansion, they actually evolve into powerful, sovereign, indigenous confederacies. They maintain their vast lands and deep cultures, acting as official, recognized protectorates of the British Crown. It completely rewrites the cultural and physical map of North America. It's like looking at a totally different planet.
But the shockwaves absolutely do not stop at the North American shoreline. They cross the Atlantic. The source highlights this massive geopolitical butterfly effect regarding the French Revolution. In our timeline, France basically bankrupted itself helping the Americans fight the British, which directly sparked the French Revolution. But here, no successful American rebellion means no French bankruptcy. Because America never bankrupts France, the French Revolution is entirely prevented. This severely delays the global spread of democracy, leaving Europe completely dominated by absolute monarchs for an entirely new century.
Let's dive into Section 3, the imperial economic engine.
Follow the dominoes with me here. The American Rebellion is utterly crushed in 1776. Because of that, the democratic uprising in France is avoided in 1789. That unbroken, continuous chain of imperial control and global dominance sets the stage for a truly monumental shift a bit later, in the year 1833. 1833. This is a staggering what-if. In historical reality, the British Empire abolished slavery across all of its territories in 1833. In this alternate reality, because the American South is still a deeply integrated part of the British Empire, slavery is eradicated there decades earlier than it was in our timeline. The result? The absolutely devastating American Civil War is entirely avoided. The entire social and economic fabric of the South is forcibly transitioned by London from across the ocean, without a single shot being fired between the states.
With the empire kept whole, a unified British North America becomes the ultimate industrial engine. It completely prevents the British Empire's eventual historical decline. London remains the undisputed financial capital of the planet. And what backs that immense wealth? It's the unmatched agricultural might of the American South combined seamlessly with the booming factories of New England. All of that wealth funnels directly back to London, allowing the British pound to entirely dictate the global economy for centuries.
Culturally, this is a massive pivot. The very concept of the American dream, that bootstrap idea that anyone can rise up and maybe even become president, is totally erased. It's replaced by what the source calls an imperial meritocracy. Ambitious colonists don't dream of the White House anymore, they dream of knighthoods. They happily trade grueling grassroots campaigns for a desperate, high society fight for a seat in the Parliament of Westminster. Power, prestige, relevance, all of it flows strictly from the crown.
Which brings us to Section 4, the world in 2026.
This alternate timeline results in the complete erasure of the 20th century's greatest conflicts. 2026 is effectively an era of Pax Britannica. We're looking at a massive, unified Anglo-American superpower dominating all global affairs. Without the geopolitical fragmentation we saw in our timeline, there are very few independent post-colonial states. The sheer, unassailable military and economic dominance of this unified British world order prevents the world wars from ever breaking out in the first place. And with no major competing superpowers rising from the ashes of those wars, the Cold War between capitalism and communism never happens. It's a world of forced, total imperial stability.
However, peace enforced from the top down always comes with a heavy cost. The source leaves us with this incredibly powerful thought. The spirit of liberty, though crushed in 1776, would remain a subterranean force, waiting for the right moment to challenge the global crown. Beneath this seemingly perfect surface of imperial peace, deep, quiet tensions are always simmering. We've got entire generations of North Americans raised under a distant, detached monarchy, and despite the incredible economic stability, they still harbor this deep cultural desire for self-determination.
Which brings us to a fascinating final thought for this explainer. Even in a world wholly conquered by the crown, even with centuries of enforced economic and military stability, is that subterranean spirit of 1776 just waiting for its perfect moment to erupt? Can the human desire for self-governance truly be extinguished forever? Or is a revolution, no matter how delayed it might be, ultimately inevitable? It's a thrilling, massive question to chew on. Thanks for joining me on this journey through an alternate timeline, and keep questioning the history you think you know.